I'm Scott Stratten, and this is the What to Speak podcast.
What the Speak, episode 42. Whatever, dude.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What to Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
Struggling with feeling comfortable in front of an audience when you present? Or maybe you're confident, but you have difficulty stumbling over filler words like and ah. Well, you can start kicking ass today by signing up for our weekly VIP updates. As a bonus, you'll also receive 11 free tips that will uncover 6 psychological secrets to public speaking, plus 5 tips on how to stop using filler words. Go to whatthespeak.com/VIP. Scott Stratten, are you ready to answer the question, what the speak?
I highly doubt it, but let's try.
I think you'll have some good answers.
Yep.
So, Scott, you're an expert in both viral and social media, a best-selling author and a keynote speaker, but would love to hear it directly from you. Can you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, it's unique for me since all I actually do now is speak. So I rant. I'm a professional ranter. I'm one of the few that, it's funny, I just literally, before coming on this, posted a clip of one of the rants, and somebody replied and said, does anybody listen to this guy? All he does is complain. I'm like, well, you just did. So that's my job. I'm a professional ranter and unmarketer, and I kind of rally against the wrongs in marketing and business, and hopefully which helps us do right.
Well, Scott, I know you're recently coming off of giving a keynote at New Media Expo, and you got a standing ovation after that. So we'll dive into some of the specifics in just a minute on that. But would love for you to share with the audience, what are some of the topics that you're usually talking about when you get up in front of an audience?
It's a lot. Usually I get in the door with that social media angle, since you name a conference or an association or an industry that doesn't want to hear about that. It's just been a wonderful thing in my world where the timing worked out really well. And so it's social, it's tech. But when it really boils down to it, it's actually about everybody's a marketer. That everything we do is marketing, whether we think it's marketing or not, that every employee is a marketer. And, even the people who you think is the last person to market can affect our brand kind of the most.
Yeah. Sweet. So would love to hear from you. How did this whole thing get started? You said now you're typically just very much focused on speaking gigs, but where did this begin for you? Can you take us back to those early days when you began speaking? Maybe even before professionally you started doing it. How were you getting out there, sharing your ideas, your voice, etc.?
Well, I always knew I was going to do talking. I knew that was going to be my thing, even from college. I knew I wanted to be, I took human resources in college, and I knew I wanted to be a trainer. Not a physical trainer, but a corporate trainer. But I was given some good advice back then, which was don't go into training right away. Be a generalist. Get experience with everything, because training, as I'm sure many people watching this know, is the first budget to get cut a lot of the time. So I didn't want to be on that end of it. So I got into HR, did the general thing. I only lasted a couple of years, mainly because I hate people a lot. So HR and hating people is not a good combo. So I became a sales trainer. And I did really well. I was in a packaging company. I flew around North America training people how to sell bubble wrap. And if you want to listen to that again, you'll realize how ridiculous that is. And if you think you can BS with your talks, I ran 2-day training schools on how to sell bubble wrap.
Wow.
You talk about filling time. I could fill 2 days. But that gave me a lot of experience and awareness where, in a B2B setting, and, then going over to the consumer side of things. At the same time, I was managing bands in Toronto in the music industry. So I knew I loved doing it, but I also knew I loved being on stage. And I cut a lot of my teeth in marketing, managing bands, but I also knew that I wanted to be the front man. I wanted to be the lead singer, but in a speaking sense. So I started doing a lot of talks, HR side of things, when it came to employee behavior and stuff, and that really took off. And then I started creating a viral marketing company. I was kind of behind the scenes for 6-7 years, and I had to get out, in front. That's my skills being a front man. So then about 4 years ago, I guess, when social media really exploded and I was along with it, the demand just exploded as well for the need for talks about that. And it wasn't just workshops, it was, keynotes. And if you could, it was really hard and really rare to find people that could keynote and then kind of just weave social media into it. Because there was a lot of people who could do workshops on social even years ago, but there wasn't a lot of kind of that keynote style that went with it. And I was able to do that. And there's still really very few of us that do a keynote that intertwines that social media side of things. And I've been just doing speaking for the past 3 years now, full time.
Wow. Well, for those in the audience that may have seen you or seen your videos of you giving a keynote presentation and kind of hearing a little bit about your story, one may think, oh, this just comes naturally to him. He's just a talker. He's good at getting up in front of people and delivering a message. But would love to hear from you. Is there anything, especially in those early days, maybe even now, still today, that you struggle with? Things that you think that you needed to improve upon, or things that you continually consider yourself in need of refining?
Well, I think that there's always something. It's just that I think I'm really good. And you have to. People say, well, that's really arrogant of you. But if you get paid to speak, you have to be confident about doing it. You have to be confident that you were the best choice out of everybody, or the best choice within the budget of what they had. And so you have to have that confidence part. But I certainly have improved. You look at even like New Media Expo, which just happened, a week or so ago. I did a keynote for them in 2010. That was like my first one of this kind of, this explosion of what I'm doing. And you can see the differences in those. So it's the constant want to improve. And for me, that's a lot content based, a lot story based. The more stories I can tell, the better it is, because that's what keynoting for me is. It's storytelling. But watching myself on video, outside of the vain need that fills, is the need for improvement. What am I doing that maybe I can change, I can do better? What content isn't resonating well enough that I can swap out something else? So if you look at the slide deck I have from 3 years ago today, it's totally different. Because the content needs to be stronger. So when I'm talking about a topic, I love the topic, so I'm always researching it and always finding new things and new stories. So it's funny, it was like 15 years ago, I used to do this all the time when I was speaking. That, like this motion, I would actually just, there was nothing in my nose. There was nothing going on here. I just did it out of habit. And until I started watching myself, I didn't realize I do it. And then I sat there, I'm like, what am I doing? What is this? Because every time I did that, it would block my mouth. So it would, and I would never see that. So the sake of filming yourself to see what you're doing, I think, is really important. I used to teach business communications at the Sheridan College here, just west of Toronto, and it was about presentation skills. And so we would make people film it and watch it. And see, because most people don't want to watch themselves talk. They don't want to talk, period. But it's the only way you're going to see your areas for improvement, because you look and sound different outside of you when you're watching it. So I used to do a lot of things. I still have the issue of trailing off sometimes when I'm talking, because I'm so loud. So I'm so loud and the mic is set so to absorb that volume, that sometimes when I'm ending a story or I say a side sarcastic comment, it gets pretty too quiet. So, I work on that now. So nobody's ever going to sit there and go, I'm done. I'm at the peak of my skill set. Exactly. I don't think we can ever get there as people, let alone speakers. But but on the other side, on the professional side of speaking, what I've always struggled with is pricing and the ability to either quote a price or quote a price confidently. And that's why I hired an assistant 8 years ago. I don't quote price. I rarely ever do. I don't even get in the conversation. My assistant knows my rate, knows my keynote fee, and has some wiggle room in there if I want, but she sticks to it. Because if it was up to me, I would take every speaking gig ever offered because I love doing it, and I would just run myself into the ground. Right. Like I've already done 100,000 miles a year of travel doing these type of things, and I don't have. We're not scalable. Unless we're selling videos, we're doing webinars, we're not scalable as keynotes, especially going to conferences. So and it happens every time. Every time if she goes on vacation or something, and she fears going on vacation because she knows I'll take a gig that comes in, and I'll take a $500 honorarium gig on the west coast of Canada because somebody was nice to me once on Twitter and I want to help them out. And then we have to turn down a $15,000 gig in Texas. This happened 2 years ago. Wow. We had to turn down an AT&T gig because I took the honorarium one. So I've always struggled with that. And I think entrepreneurs in general, could struggle with that a lot. But for me, especially when you get into those keynote fees where it's ridiculously high, you don't even feel right quoting them. So you don't want to do it. So we have the bureaus do it. My assistant does it as well.
So Scott, with some of the stuff that you've been able to identify, the business aspect of it is pretty clear cut. But for things like, some of those habitual things that you've worked on minimizing and identifying, even, first and foremost, are those things that you've done yourself, or do you work with a coach? Have you worked with a coach at all, to kind of iron out some of those things and really work on bringing out kind of your natural personality?
I'm my biggest critic, so it's that makes me my best coach sometimes, is I can spot it. I don't really I don't talk speaking skills with people. I talk speaking business with my peers. We talk about what we're doing with business, whether it's travel, fees, and everything else. But I don't. I observe other speakers. I observe the ones I respect and enjoy and see why they do what they do. But here's the challenge when you do that is, emulate is a fancy word for copy, and you don't want to be somebody else's style. So I might love watching Gary Vaynerchuk speak, but that's his style. We're both spastic and loud and flailing, but he's got his own style and I've got mine. And to the point where sometimes I had a few years there where I didn't watch anybody speak because I didn't want to feel like I was lifting their style. Right. And their content. So until I got, same with writing a book, until I got comfortable with my own content and style, I didn't want to let the others kind of come into it because I didn't want to rip anybody off. So I don't work with the coach. Doesn't mean people shouldn't work with the coach, but it's not where I'm at, because there's for me, I don't want to be cocky. I was born with some natural talent to speak and to tell stories where other people might need to kind of get that training, because I used to do the training. I used to do the teaching. Yeah. So I certainly understand the need for it, but it wasn't something that I kind of ever used.
Gotcha. So Scott, your whole thing is what you call unmarketing. And we'll have a link to your website in the show notes for people that want to explore this a little bit more. But real quick, can you give us like a rundown of what unmarketing is? And then I would love to talk about how this approach to unmarketing is something that you use, or at least I'm assuming that you use when you put together your presentations.
Yeah, unmarketing is all about, it's the anti-marketing. It's still marketing no matter what way you cut it, but unmarketing is about staying in front of your audience with content, with connection. So when they have the need for your product or service, they choose you. It's just familiarity. It's staying as frequency. And the old thing in marketing was, we have to advertise something 7 to 9 times where somebody takes action or takes notice. Well, my whole world is, instead of paying for it, why don't we just stay in front of them 7 to 9 times with great stuff, with content, with opinion, with helpful things. And that's what marketing was. It's really about frequency. And that's why social media blew up and worked so well with it, because it was a great way to be staying in front of that audience. But back in even the old days, it was about article writing and getting that into media and blogging and networking events and connecting. So the unmarketing side of things was really because I found everybody hated marketing. Everybody hated selling. And I really thought that nobody liked doing cold calls. I created the name Unmarketing out of my friend getting a cold call at his desk at his office, and he berated the guy on the phone. He told him to get a real job and hung up the phone. And we talked about it afterwards. And he says, "Okay, Scott, you got to go. I got to go do my calls for the day." And I'm like, You just got mad at the guy for doing it to you. And he's like, "Yeah." And here's what he said. He goes, "Yeah, but I sell something that they need." I'm like, see, that's the problem. It's the hypocritical marketing. And I didn't like it. I didn't buy into it. I knew people that would like literally throw up before they did cold calls. I mean, I'm physically sick. Wow. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And so I picked the title Unmarketing because it worked, but also I thought it would look good on a book cover one day. And so I think it does. And so we went from there. And it really resonated. I wrote the book and created the concept I thought would resonate really well with entrepreneurs. And it turns out it resonates with corporate as well, especially the internal people who also want to find different ways, whether that's because budgets are being squeezed or advertising isn't what it used to be. And so it's had a bigger audience than I ever thought it would.
Very cool. So yeah, are there some of the principles kind of rooted in this idea, this notion of unmarketing that you've written about and speak about? Are there things, principles, ideas, concepts that carry over into how you essentially, because keynote speaking is very much a form of transmitting your message to an audience, trying to persuade them, inspire them. Any lessons there for us to walk away from?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially speakers, if they go and do gigs, especially if they don't get paid for them, sometimes you're out of pocket going to these gigs, and they have a pressure they feel like they have to sell from stage. And I was never good at that. I think I'm a brilliant speaker and a horrible salesperson, and I never want to pitch. I think the best way to sell is to teach. And so my whole unmarketing philosophy in speaking is leave it all out on the table. The last thing I want to hear from a speaker on stage is the 6 tips of success. Here's the first 2. And to get the last 4, just, buy my book or sign up for my program or something. And that kills me. And that used to be my industry. I used to be a lot involved in the internet marketing side of things. And that was the entire industry. It's 20 speakers in 2 days. And everyone had to pitch because they are all out of pocket getting there. And they split half of it with the organizer. And it was just like, it was almost like a brainwashing. And I found the best way for me to get more speaking gigs is to kill it at a speaking gig, just to give the best I've got, because that creates referrals. And so that's what we did. And then we took the video of the speaking gigs, made those into clips. But and the difference for what we were doing, what we're doing now, versus a lot of speaker videos, is speakers still make demos. They have their name at the start with cheesy royalty-free music coming in, and then they have a couple clips and their names, their testimonials come across in iMovie and stuff. Yeah. What we've done is take like the best story or clip from a keynote and made it a video of content. So the QR codes kill kittens, or there was a video called The Problem with QR Codes. If you search YouTube, you'll see it. It's got 140,000 views. That's my keynote. It's a clip. It's a 4-minute clip, but it's a story. And it's the best sales tool I've ever used online, and that's Unmarketing. Yeah. I didn't sit there and pitch, open up, keynote speaker, and here's a testimonial. I just gave a clip of a story. And that's brought me more interest in events than any demo reel would have gotten me before.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I've seen that video, and it pulls you in right from the very beginning and gives you a really good.
It's because I'm yelling the entire time, mostly. Yeah.
So, Scott, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of how you put together these presentations. You've got a lot of stories. There's tons of comedy or comedic elements, things that I think seem very natural to who you are and your personality. But can you break it down for us? When you think about, okay, I'm going to be giving this keynote to XYZ association or whoever the audience is, what are some of the steps that you go through to prepare for that and pull your material together?
I have like any speaker, I have a deck, of slides and stories and examples. So, right now I probably have about 80 to 100 slides I can pull from. I have core ones that will go in every one. There's core concepts that no matter who you are, no matter who I'm talking to, you're going to get these same core parts. And it's the examples, the samples, the picture examples that I can pull out that will be more industry relevant. But the core pillars are always going to be the same, unless they evolve in my talk. So I kind of have a core set of probably 25 to 30 of those slides that will be in every one. And then I'm going to put in another 15, industry specific, depending on, if they're an audience of geeks, I can talk about SEO type of stuff. And I can talk about, ICQ and all these type of things that a room of non-tech people won't get. And on the other side of it, I can have people who just are not tech at all, and I can use examples, insurance examples, or doctor examples, or dentist examples, something like that. So one of the keys to talking to, I think, this is the problem when you speak out of a can, when you just do the same talk every time. You got to, adult learning principle number 1 is relevancy. And the audience has to think what you're saying is relevant. Unless you're a celebrity speaker, unless you're Joe Montana or you're Bill Clinton, you've got to there's got to be relevance, relevant, a frame of reference for it. So when they walk out, they feel like, he knows what we're going through. So my angle that works for every audience is that, social media, you don't have to be there. You don't have to be everywhere. And, us making people feel dumb is not a smart move. So I really have 3 things I want people to walk out there with when it comes to the core takeaways. And all around that are the stories and the humor that make people listen, right? So I think the people, more they laugh, the more they listen. And so when I can use humor, and you understand between those humor points, there's some solid takeaway points that they walk out there with, because you can't just be a comedian, or you can be a comedian, that's what you're hired as, but as a keynote, you can't just have humor with some substance to it. So we swap it out, but in general, we use a core set plus the variable ones, and then also that changes because of how much time you're given. Yeah. And you got to be also flexible, because when they say you might get 45 minutes and then all of a sudden you got 30, I have a point where most of my slides are just visuals. They're just pictures. And I can drop out of the talk at any given point and people will never know that wasn't the real end.
Yeah.
I don't tell them what I'm going to tell them, and tell them what I told them. I don't have a summary slide at the end. I don't have action items and points. I just can go and I can close anywhere in that slide deck because it's not text-based. It's the content isn't on the slides necessarily, where if the bulb on the projector goes, I can do the talk. It'll be a little bit different, but you got to be flexible in that because, I've had talks where they've given me an hour and actually they ended up giving me 20 minutes. It's like, which is fascinating to me how that happens. But I've had that. I've flown across the continent and they get there and they're like, you got 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay. They paid, I'll go do it. But, and the audience loves it. And you walk out saying you missed 2/3 of it. But as a speaker, that should be our skill. That's our responsibility. I think our responsibility as speakers is to, deliver valuable content, but also end within the time constraints we're given. Because that's I used to be on the other side of the table. I used to be part of a conference years ago in Toronto. And when speakers ran over, it just messed everything up. Wow. So I'm a huge conscious of that when I'm on stage with what time I've got. And before I go on stage, almost every time I ask the organizer, so I was told I have an hour, but if we've run over, it's like 1 o'clock or it's 1:15. I said, do I have an hour or do I have till 2? And that's because I want to make sure that I can get them back on track if I have to. And they appreciate that greatly as well, because I can be a little bit flexible when it comes to that.
So many good things there that you just shared with us. Lots of great takeaways and little tidbits. Scott, the one thing that I wanted to know was when you are up on stage, it sounds like you've got your framework and obviously you're flexible with your slides and how things are structured. Do you rehearse these stories or are they just coming out, again, kind of part of who you are and your personality? Because they seem like, it's just pure passion, pure just let's sit down and let me tell you this story, or here's a funny example.
Yeah,
or have you practiced these?
Never practiced. I've never rehearsed. I'm the worst student of all of the speaking business because I've never walked through anything. The first time I've told these stories you see on stage was on stage. And I've told other stories that if they didn't resonate as well, they didn't get the laugh I wanted or anything, I pop them out. The first time I tell stories, though, is I'm like, amazing. I have a story about Delta in New York. And when the whole incident was happening in the middle of it, one thing I'm like, I'm so angry right now. And the other side was, this is going to be a great story. Yeah. It was just, my mind's always thinking about what I'm going to say. And my style, although animated and loud, is also very casual. That I'm just talking. And I think that the stories come out in a natural way when they're not rehearsed. And I see a lot of speakers, and this is what bugs me with the industry, is there's some forced things. There's forced hand movements. There's forced gestures. I read a freaking blog post on one of the association blogs 2 months ago about where you should stand on stage at different points. It hurts my soul. Like I've died a bit inside after I read that. And I'm like, you can't plan spontaneity. You can't plan authenticity. I think the audience knows that. At least I think most of the audience knows that. Some don't. But, when you purposely walk over to this side and start projecting with your hands and walk over to this side and do that, I'm like, it's just weird. And I just think the more natural we are at speaking, the more ourselves we are at speaking, the better the speaking comes across, because the less nervous we are. So I don't have to think that I've been here 4 minutes on this side of the stage. I need to move to the left side of the stage because they say I need to keep the audience moving. Like literally, that's a freaking blog post I just read. Like you can't make this stuff up. And but that's part of our industry. That's part of the speaking industry, where our industry events talk about stage presence and anchoring on stage and back of room sales. And I'm like, the more relatable, the more connecting you make with your audience, the better your talk goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a wide range of guests on the show, and it's always great to see everybody's unique perspective. And I think the really great thing about somebody like yourself, who's really dialed into the message that the audience needs to hear, and really the fervor that you've got personally for that topic, and to just be able to have this be a natural extension of who you are is such a great thing. And there's so many amazing lessons that many of us can learn from. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Oh, my absolute pleasure.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you, and then we'll move on to our final portion of our discussion, is these stories, these examples that you've got. Is there a process that you have for collecting these and kind of organizing them? do you keep a notebook, a journal, a file folder? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Well, it's funny because I'm trying to learn Evernote right now because I don't have the system for it. And it's funny because Allison, my muse and my right arm in life, she also helps write the books and she comes to all the talks. I will say literally, I'll say something on stage spontaneous, just comes out of nowhere, and I say it, and I realize it's good. And I'll look at her from stage, and I'll just kind of give her this stare for a second, and she'll be like, boo, 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 and she'll write it down for me because she knows that I want to remember that, because I'll forget it 10 minutes later. I always email myself stuff. I'm putting in my notes in my phone. I share it with her. That's why I want to learn Evernote. I need a better system for it because right now it's not working as well as it should.
Yeah.
And because for me, my speaking and my stories are also book content. That's, we've written 3 books now. We're writing the 4th. We're writing Unselling right now. So we're on the book number 4. So the content is the same that we use, let's say, on the stage, that we use in the book, that we use for the Unpodcast. It all is the same. It all intertwines. So I'm always getting new material, whether there's stories about my experiences, which are usually the strongest stories because they're obviously personal experiences, but also, retelling of ones that we see out there. I open my talks right now with the Joshi story from Ritz-Carlton. The kid left the stuffed giraffe, and, they had him posing around the resort because that's a great way to set the tone. But I also, in the middle of the whole content is mine. So nobody can retell that story as well as I can.
Cool. Well, I love it, Scott. You've got very a unique approach and so many great things. So the final thing that we'll end on to wrap up our discussion is our rapid fire Q&A. So we'll just do a half dozen questions. First thing that comes to your mind. And this first one we talked about a little bit, but would love to ask you, slides or no slides?
You stumped me already. I use slides, but I also love a no slider.
Yeah. Well, it's good because, like you said, the slides are there as a visual aid to help reinforce the message that you're verbally delivering. But at the same time, if something happens, you got to cut something, the projector goes out, whatever, you've got to be ready.
Bingo.
Yep. Okay, so what's the speaker that resonates with you most, maybe somebody that inspires you? Who is that person and why?
I've really taken a liking lately to Dan Ariely, who wrote The Truth About Dishonesty, and a couple other ones. I just saw him speak in the summer at TAM, which is the Amazing Meeting, which is the Skeptics Conference, which is an amazing conference to walk around. We were all skeptical of each other. Predictably Irrational as well is another book. He's just a great casual speaker. He's a professor, and I just really loved it. And I actually loved all the speakers there because most of them weren't speakers. They were just talking about passion. So I love Dan's stuff. Gary Vaynerchuk's always a good time to watch. Yeah. I love how Gladwell speaks. I love his casual style. He's the epitome of storytelling. Whether or not you want to believe the stories or the correlations to the data he uses is up to you. But he's a great storyteller. And I really respect that. And even back to Les Brown was my inspiration 15 years ago to start speaking. I saw him on a feed from Buffalo, New York, on a PBS, pledge drive. And it was like 25 years ago I saw it. And I'm like, I want to do that. Yeah. So, once in a while, a dose of Les is good too. Yeah.
Les is somebody that multiple people have cited as an inspiration. So I certainly agree with that. So Scott, here's somebody that seems like you can just roll with something crazy that happens on stage, but I would love to hear, is there anything that you can share with us that's the craziest, silliest, funniest, most bizarre thing that's happened to you while on stage?
I don't know what has not happened. Like I name it. I've been heckled at a speaking event, like NSA, like a speaking conference. I was heckled by a fellow speaker. I'm like, it's just ridiculous, which was the most ridiculous thing I've probably ever done. But just name the physical ailment, name the bulb going. I was speaking in Dawson City in the Yukon, and the river broke in the ice, and it's apparently an entire city event. So an alarm went off, and everybody just ran down to the river. I got I was in Istanbul doing an event out there. They translated the book to Turkish, and I went out there, came back. I had a parasite in my stomach apparently from it, and I had to do the rest of my book tour while I'm not remembering it. I don't remember it. I had 103-degree fever. Allison just escorted me around to city. I did 3 talks I have no recollection of, including Vegas in front of 2,000 people. at the driving sales event, and I killed it. I got 3 other gigs from it. And I don't remember a word. And I don't know how my body was functioning at the time. I just took a bunch of Imodium and some Tylenol and went with it. So I haven't fainted yet on stage, almost twice, but that hasn't happened yet. And I also haven't thrown up. That's the other thing. So it's I'm sure that'll happen one day. So I haven't fallen, and I haven't had any bodily functions, come out of me. But everything else, has, from the slides not working to the mic falling off me to right before I did a gig in Vegas. I used to wear a black T-shirt and jeans speaking, and the girl from the company looked me up and down and said, "Can you go change into something else more appropriate?" And I'm like, "Nope. No, I can't." and I ended up getting a standing ovation at that gig, and it was funny because she looked really bad after that. So you name it, and I've done it. And at the end of the day, the best advice I can give for those things too is most of the time the audience doesn't know whatever happened. So don't hint on it. Don't hint that it was missing. The worst thing a speaker can do is say, "Well, the video is not working, but if it did, it would have been great." Don't tell the audience they're missing something. Yeah. If the slides aren't working, go. You're supposed to be the expert on something. If you can't talk a half hour, 45 minutes on a topic, and you're the expert on it without slides, I don't know if you're the expert.
Yep. So true. Awesome. Well, I would love to also find out from you. Obviously, speaking is a big part of your business now, but your ability to get up in front of an audience, what kind of impact has that had on the path that you've found yourself on, and ultimately where you're continuing to head with your career?
I'm literally, without any cheese on it, I'm literally living my dream. This is what I always wanted to do. I wanted to speak for a living. And 2 years ago, I stopped consulting. And because I was speaking, I was going around doing the books, and I realized when I got home, I was consulting, and so I never stopped. And I said, I didn't do this, to hate it. If I wanted to hate it, I'd work for somebody. I didn't want to go that way. So I stopped, and I said, I'm going to try just doing speaking. And I can't, and I don't work a day in my life. My job is to stay on top of the topics and go places, and I get to see the world, and I get paid for it. It's a ridiculous industry and career, and it's not led me to something. It is my something, and it's all I do. And the books feed the speaking feeds the books. And I never thought I'd be an author. I never thought I'd be, standing on the stage where I am now. That it's a cool life I got.
Awesome. Well, our last question is around this idea of when you were first starting off, and now all the experience that you've had and the lessons that you've learned. Is there one piece of advice that you'd give somebody who's just getting started themselves right now today?
Yeah, I think that always value your time, that you're going to be to the point where you just want to speak to get validated. And I understand, because that's where I was too. But always try to get something from the gig. Now, that means if you're starting out, you're going to have to do freebies. You're going to have to do this type of things. But I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a boxed lunch that they're going to give you, or some extra tickets that you can give colleagues to come, or they film it and you get a copy. Just don't give away all of your value for nothing, or it's a referral, or give them, who else would that I think would enjoy my talk. That never give away your value without feeling you got value back. Now, that might be the first gig, meaning they just let you speak so you felt good about it, but eventually you're going to go and feel like you need something more. So always feel like you're getting some kind of value back, whether that means monetary or collateral, or if a company hires you and says they have no budget, but they make Frisbees, then get 100 Frisbees. Like, do something to get, there's always leverage somewhere, and there's always negotiation.
Cool. Well, Scott, we're going to have links to your website, your social media accounts, and any other resources, maybe some video clips of you speaking over at the show notes at whatthespeak.com. And I want to truly thank you so much for your time, sharing your stories and a little bit about your journey into the world of speaking. You truly are somebody that kicks ass when they speak, present, or pitch.
Thanks, man. I rarely get to talk about the business, so I love it. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. If you liked what today's guest had to share in our discussion, you may want to grab an audio copy of their latest book for free by going to WTSaudiobook.com. That's WTSaudiobook.com.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whatthespeak.com for show notes on every episode, and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.